All right, let's go ahead and get started. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are for the CA Endevor V18 GA overview webcast. Before we get started, just a reminder that if you are in the WebEx audio broadcast, and I think most of you are, you'll have to use the Q&A box right in the WebEx to ask your questions. If you don't see that box in the lower right of your screen right now, hit the question mark icon in the upper right and it will open up for you. When it comes time, I will also invite you to, those of you who are on the phone line, I'll invite you to unmute your line and I'll tell you how then to ask your questions at the end. Please feel free to use the Q&A box throughout the session, and between myself, Vaughn, and Pete, we'll make sure that we get as many questions answered as we can. And with that, I'm going to hand you off to Vaughn Marshall and Pete McCullough from the Endevor team. So take it away, guys.
Thanks, Len. Welcome, everyone. Today what we're going to be covering is all of the features and functionality and new value that we've just recently released with Endevor V18. For those of you who've been following, Endevor has been under development of V18 for quite some time using our Agile incremental release program. And just back at the end of April this year, we rolled up all of that value into our new GA release. So what we're going to cover today, we'll have a quick introduction, including an introduction of myself. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the new product manager for Endevor. We'll be covering what's new in V18 GA, and then looking at the features and the capabilities in detail, and then lastly, we'll be taking questions and summarizing what we talked about. So, as I just mentioned, my name is Vaughn Marshall. I am the new product manager for Endevor. I've been with CA now probably about, I'd say it's going on 4 years. I came over to CA through the acquisition of the CA Application Lifecycle Manager product, and I'm still actually the product manager for that as well. And of course, you guys probably all know Pete. Pete McCullough is our product owner. So he works with me on very closely on the product and the development of the product in terms of the responsibilities. I kind of work on the business feature direction side. Pete works more on the technology side, and together we drive development of Endevor among other products. Pete, by the way, is also the product owner for CA Application Lifecycle Conductor as well, so there's some harmony there. Basically, the reason that we're here to talk today is because of the announcement of the GA complete release of version 18 of Endevor. For those of you that haven't seen the posts or anything like that, it was done as of April 27th this year, so not too long ago. And we've basically been delivering Endevor probably for about 2 years now in increments. And this is really part of our goal to get customers value, quicker rather than having them to wait in between releases and so on. And of course, we still have to do a GA release as well, because not everybody uses increments. But basically, you can see from the version number that the GA complete release is 18.0.12. And what that means is that we have had 12 incremental deliveries in between when we started development on V18 and now. So 18.0.12 is both the 12th incremental and also the GA complete release. And as a development organization, our policy is generally when we release a new GA version of one of our products, we have about 12 months before you can before the old version, the last GA version, goes end of support. That said, our customers have all indicated that because some of their efforts to upgrade Endevor involve a lot of testing, especially if they've got custom processes and so on, that 12 months might not be long enough. So we heard that feedback, and for Endevor, we've actually made it 18 months, and that basically puts V17's end of support date at October 31st, 2019. And if you want, you can see over here all the different dates that we've had different incrementals going out back to 18.0.1. which basically started in October 2015. So you can see it's been quite some time with lots of different things till now. In terms of what we are trying to build with Endevor now and with this release and in the future, ultimately, if we think about Endevor as a rock-solid platform that's been used for many, many years as both an SCM and as a lifecycle management solution on the mainframe, one of the things that customers love about it is the ability to automate things and its rock-solid reputation as stable, secure, proven, and so on. That said, there's areas that we can improve and want to improve. So one of the things, one of the key areas that we want to do that in is the user experience. We want to make it so that it's easier to use, and also to address, the user experience for new developers. So as our workforce gets closer and closer to retirement from the mainframe perspective, new developers are coming in, and they have a very different expectation of how to work with software change systems. So what we're trying to do is enable them, and to enable everybody really, to have more choice in how they interact with their mainframe SCM. And so we've been doing a lot of work on that. That's one of the goals that we have with our future development. Of course, we want to develop the user experience out for ISPF developers as well. In addition, as different organizations start to adopt DevOps processes in their distributed cloud and mobile development shops, they're starting to ask, how do we incorporate the mainframe as part of that? And so one of the things that we've aimed to do with 18 and beyond is to look at how we can integrate or facilitate integration of mainframe into DevOps. And the way that we're doing that is through use of industry standard APIs like REST APIs to allow calls into the mainframe to leverage different things that you might do with the SCM there. And in addition, be able to react to events that are happening on the mainframe with DevOps tools that maybe don't live on the mainframe, things like Jenkins's and stuff like that. And the way that we've adopted that is through capability around webhooks. And of course, we want to continue to build out the continuous testing, continuous delivery, continuous integration, automation capabilities in the tool itself through the processors and whatnot. Another thing that's a key piece is application development as a service. So again, if we think about how users, especially the new users, are approaching development on the mainframe, they really want to be able to use tools that maybe don't live on the mainframe. So IDEs, things like that, command lines, and so on. And so what we want to do is facilitate Endevor as basically a platform that is basically the same as any other platform that you might use in the cloud and distributed environment, where you have things like cloud environments, but you basically interact with them from your laptops and not necessarily concern yourself with the operating systems that they're running on and so on. We also aim to exploit the latest and greatest hardware and software from IBM. So that's definitely a goal that we want to meet. From a product architecture goal, we want to keep everything for test and deployment trouble-free, automated, right? So lifecycle automation, we want to basically ensure the ways that we facilitate integration with DevOps tools on and off the mainframe is industry standard. So again, that's why we've adopted things like REST and webhooks instead of something custom protocols or anything like that. We want to ensure that we can integrate with open source DevOps tools, which are becoming very prevalent in customer organizations, and also, of course, with our own DevOps tools. And all at the same time, we want to ensure that the platform stays rock solid and secure. So some marquee features that we are releasing with Endevor V18. We've made a number of audit-related improvements, and Pete's going to go through all of these in detail. And we've also really put a lot of work into our UIs and interfaces. So we've put a lot of work into ISPF interfaces and quick edit, namely support for things like long elements and so on. We've done a ton of work on the Eclipse UI, In fact, I would say that it's starting to approach the point that you can do, as a developer, pretty much everything that you need to do from Eclipse, which wasn't the case with V17. And of course, as I mentioned before, opening up the UI to other interfaces that maybe aren't even built by us, so the REST UI, the REST interface, and so on. In terms of automation capabilities, we have the ability to do things with processors. We have the ability and have for many, many years been able to automate on the mainframe, but the addition of webhooks really allows us to automate off the mainframe as well, which is a key piece when a lot of organizations are adopting things like Jenkins or DevOps tools that don't live on the mainframe. So that bidirectional communication into the mainframe is key to keeping it part of a modern DevOps environment. And of course, we've looked at how we can support things like Agile and concurrent development with configuration in Endevor as well, and make that easy for customers to adopt. So with that, I will turn it over to Pete to go through the details of each of these, and Pete, just let me know when you want me to advance.
Okay, thanks, Fawn. Hi, everybody. This is going to be a little bit different than our normal presentation, or my normal presentation, in that we usually do a lot of back and forth conversations through this. So this instead, as Len had suggested, please use the chat if you have any questions, and we can come back to the conversation later on. Organizing the delivery of the features of V18 into these key marquee areas. The first one is audit-related improvements. The dynamic approver disqualification option is something that I think many sites have actually implemented long ago with Endevor through the use of customized user exits. This provides the capability to prevent package approvers from approving their own changes for their own packages. So out of the box, you can turn on that capability now, and that approver disqualification actually works at the package level, so that an approver that is not authorized to approve a particular package for one, but they can approve other packages that they did not modify those elements. We've also, as a request from you guys, we got a request to provide a auditor's guide to Endevor. And what this was about is that there's a lot of IT auditors that approach our Endevor administrators for information about Endevor, what things that they should be looking at, and that kind of thing. And as we've got new generation of Endevor administrators, those questions are becoming more difficult to answer. So we created an auditor's guide, which is a comprehensive list of all of the items in Endevor, from user exits to processors to external security interfaces. All of those things are summarized in the auditor's guide and complete with a checklist with our recommendations, so that you could hand that over to your auditor and get them started with their work with Endevor. So that supposedly make both your life and your auditor's life a little bit easier. One of the things that had been lacking in Endevor, we've had security recording and element action recording, and now we have admin action recording available through SMF. So that's just keeping up with the audit kind of opportunities with Endevor. And following on with version 17, where we introduced the alter action, which is a new element action that was created to enable people that are authorized to change specific Endevor metadata fields, such as comments, CCIDs, processor groups, that kind of thing. There was some concern about letting this loose to your end users without much control. So we've actually enhanced our external security interface to allow you to define to Endevor what metadata fields can be modified by your end users. And then lastly, on the audit-related improvements is the entitlement to install a piece of CA Compliance Event Manager, which is the PDS monitor capability, which will allow you to configure Compliance Event Manager to send out alerts and actually provide change information when and if someone outside of, I shouldn't say outside of Endevor, but modifies data sets outside of Endevor control. That would be very normal for administrators as authorized or privileged users, but it's good to have an audit trail of when those things were happening. But in the awful case where somebody didn't read that auditor's guide to Endevor and did not properly secure the external managed data sets outside of Endevor, or the data sets managed by Endevor through the alternate ID, you can easily configure Compliance Event Manager to send alerts when that happens. So as I said, this is an entitlement to anyone that is licensed for the CA Endevor product. We can go forward, Vaughn. So this is just a screenshot of what the PDS monitoring facility might look like. There's a few screens that are available where you can define the rules that would say, based on this user ID, do this activity, and you can actually configure the email alert to contain the information about the person, the when, the where of the data set, and other information. So that's just an idea of what it looks like. And go forward, Vaughn.
Yeah, what's interesting too, Pete, is that approval section is you can have somebody who's making changes require approval. It looks like, so that might be of interest too.
Thanks, Vaughn. So going to the user interfaces for Endevor, as many of you who have been with the product for quite some time know that the long element name was always a challenge with our ISPF dialogues, that we thought that our distributed interface, our distributed UIs, Change Manager, Enterprise Workbench would be the choice for manipulating long element names, but we heard you loud and clear and have enhanced the Endevor dialogue, and through several iterations through our delivery process with V18, I think we finally got it right, so that for people that do need to have long name access, they can use it. They can have direct access to USS directories, and but for those that don't want to have it, there's an option that is now based on the user profile that they could either be in short mode, which is the pre-long element name option, which is V17 and earlier, which is pretty much similar to what it was there, or you could be in long mode, which has some scrollable fields and scrollable panels to support it. We also introduced widescreen support on the selection list, so that left-right scrolling is available, more metadata is available for viewing. Also, with the Eclipse UI, one of the drawbacks of the V17 plugin was that it did not support packages, and that was our primary purpose with V18, to add the capability to perform all package actions using the Eclipse UI. We have a very, very powerful viewing capability, the package view, like the element view. You can see all of the metadata, the Endevor metadata associated with the package, and you can pick and choose which fields you actually want to display through customizations, and you can even sort the columns. We've gotten a lot of these requests for to do this on the ISPF displays, but it's already built into the Eclipse, so if you're interested, I would highly recommend checking that out. In addition to the packages and the extra metadata, there's tooltips available that are associated primarily on the element and package views, that as you scroll over them, they'll give you information such as an element that's been signed out. It will tell you who it's been signed out to, an element that's been locked to a package, or elements that are had failed the generate process, or had some kind of non-zero return code in the processor. You can scroll over or mouse over the tooltip, and it will give you some information. And then you could go right from that plugin and view the element listings and that kind of objects to see what's going on. We've also added with the Eclipse UI a distributed version of Parallel Development Manager options, so that you could actually use Eclipse-based capabilities to do compare and merge. So for people that are familiar with that, they'll be very happy to see that. And then with CA Des, there is some really cool features that are available with COBOL, that you can actually have the editor in Des expand the COBOL copy members while you're in edit on that element. I'm not sure, but I think you might be able to actually use that editor to modify those copy members as a side session. Next screen, Vaughn. So this is a display of the Endevor Quick Edit panel. As you'll see that the panel has been rearranged a little bit, so that the amount of tabbing required to get to your most common fields, like the element and type, are right at the top. So it's much more easier to use than prior, if you ask me. And it is done in such a way that the field scroll left to right is necessary, as you see with the plus sign at the end of the element name. And then there's also capabilities for having the capability to have shortcuts to get to the ISPF commands or the commands on that line. I believe there is a shortcut that's not displayed in this presentation. You'll check it out when you install V18, that you could actually, for the power users, suppress those Endevor quick edit commands so that you don't take up much screen real estate on that panel. Next screen, please. And the Eclipse UI is an example of looking at the packages, and you'll see that right-clicking on the package, you'll see all of the options that are available. The ones that are grayed out, obviously, the package is not in the right status to perform those actions, but it's as easy as doing that and seeing it. Very modern interface, and I really, as I stressed, the reporting capability of getting a list and filtering a list based on the metadata is amazing, powerful.
Yeah, I'll also add that this entry here, assigned to project, allows you to take a package, essentially associated with a project in your workspace that you're working on, and then from there you can right-click the different elements that you want to put into the package, and it will generate the SCL. So very much like using ISPF, you don't have to write SCL manually or anything like that. You can have a generated package SCL.
And currently at this time, that's move SCL. So. And why don't you go ahead, Vaughn, and you can describe the merge capability of the Eclipse UI, how that works.
Sure. So the merge capability of the Eclipse UI really allows you to perform concurrent and parallel development. So one of the things that is mentioned earlier is we've revamped our project workspace so that it's a lot easier to see what's local and what's remote. And basically, by doing that, you can have a copy in your own workspace that maybe doesn't match something that's in what's up on the mainframe. And then you can do compares and merges because now these two things aren't showing as one entry inside of the workspace. And when you do that, you can do what's called an in-workspace merge to fix out of sync conditions, to incorporate changes that are maybe coming from different places or different developers, and you can do it in a graphical manner. So it's not really a great compare view on the screenshot here, but basically you'd be able to see highlights that are different between the code, jump from one section to the next section, choose to take the right or the left, or to merge something together, and then essentially build a new element out of the combined elements.
And as Vaughn had mentioned at the beginning, one of our focuses is to make Endevor accessible to distributed applications. And the REST API was originally implemented with V17 with our package actions. We've since with V18, we've created REST APIs for each of the element actions. And everything that you can do through SCL is pretty much supported through the REST API, with the exception of archive file related actions. Those are not available through the REST. But with the REST capability, you can tie in Endevor with other things, like the Endevor Eclipse plugin uses the REST. Jenkins could use the REST to drive Endevor package actions and that kind of thing. And with V18, we've updated our REST implementation so that all the metadata is returned in JSON format. It's kind of a standard process. This one is probably the most exciting feature to me, what's delivered in V18. There's a lot of good stuff in V18, but the automation capabilities available through the webhook servers implementation really makes a big change that Endevor that had not been there before in prior releases. Prior release, whenever you wanted to see something that changed in Endevor, you would typically have to write your own user access to log it, or you would have to run some kind of report extract and then do compares and that kind of thing to figure out what changed. But with the webhooks, you can actually dynamically configure Endevor to record both package events, which are package actions, or element actions for certain inventory locations or specified inventory locations. to get recorded, and then the webhook server will be alerted when Endevor performs the action, and then that will wake up and it will evoke an endpoint that you've configured. And that could be something such as a process that could say, hey, somebody checked in an element, and now I want to fetch that element down to my distributed platform and run SonarQube to validate or analyze the source code, and then maybe drive up and approve or something like that. So it really goes a long way to automation through the DevOps processing. Exciting. Moving forward one. The Agile and concurrent development, it's kind of funny that there's people that think that because Endevor was 30 years old, and actually it's not 30 years old, it's 31 years old now, happy birthday, and that it's not, doesn't support modern development techniques, and when in fact the architecture of Endevor does allow for it, and forgive me for those people that have heard this 1,000 times, but Endevor does stand for Environment for Development and Operations. That was the acronym of the name, and that was established, I think, in 1988 when the product was renamed from Control 1 to Endevor. So we have been in the Agile DevOps business for quite some time, and the CA people here that were working on all our mainframe products are using Endevor to maintain Endevor, and we've implemented in such a way that it does support our Agile implementation. We make use of sandboxes and other processes that work out very, very well and are proven, and we have our implementation has a short life cycle so that it goes pretty much dev, QA, prod, which allows us to publish features and fixes very quickly as opposed to going through a longer life cycle. If you're interested in that, we have all of this documented in our DocOps documentation as configuring Endevor for concurrent development in Agile. It explains naming conventions and other things that to take into consideration. And we also provide out-of-the-box sandbox processors to help support that, so that once it's configured, you can have your end users say, hey, I need a sandbox, and they create an element of a specific type, which we use as sandbox, and which actually generates an Endevor subsystem and all of the supporting data sets that they need to do the work. And then once they're done with that, the delete of that sandbox element will clean up behind it. So once that sandbox process is defined, there's really not much admin work required to support your end users. And then we've also began looking at automation for testing. And one of the downsides of sandboxes is that because the names come and go, they're usually based on a change ID, that it's difficult to work with a Kix region or some other thing without having to update it all the time to point to new load libraries. So the deploy to test feature was implemented so that you could define a more static test sandbox that you could use and point your Kix and IAM or DB2 subsystems to, so that when developers are ready to do some integration testing, they could do a deploy to test function, which would eventually transfer those elements to that other Endevor location for testing. So this is something that we are looking at further automating with the next release of Endevor, so stay tuned on that one. Going forward one. So we have had some miscellaneous enhancements, and I felt kind of bad calling them miscellaneous because they're actually pretty significant. One of them was a very high runner in the ideation polling, and that was the ability to, it's very difficult to explain, so be patient with me, to identify change levels that have been moved to production through sort of a back door, like otherwise move with history. The reason for this is that a lot of people do consolidation at an integration stage with multiple change levels, and they have all of those levels there in that integration stage. And then when they move with history, all of those change levels go to production, but only that less level is the one that's reflected in your MCF and in a processor output libraries usually. And auditors would really be interested to know what other changes were also promoted like behind the scenes. And this move with history identifier that we've added with version 18 provides the capability to identify those levels that got copied to production, but were never done as the most current level. So they were kind of went in sort of a backdoor approach. That's not the best word for it, but that's essentially what happens. And with this capability, now auditors can see exactly what other changes got moved in production besides that last one. And with that, we've also provided the capability to perform a CCID search. Actually, we extended the CCID search so that now, besides only the limited search that we have today with the MCF, you can now search through Endevor change levels as well to see those history indicators. The intelligent deployment enhancement was added to help some sites that are using package ship to ship to a large number of destinations, and through the package ship function required the end user to identify what destinations to ship the package to. And when this feature was invented long ago, it was never seen to be a big issue because we had 2 or 3 remote locations where we want to do the deployment. But we've got some customers now that have 30, 50 different deployment sites, and they ship different things to different places, and it became very confusing for their end user to figure out what was what. And essentially, they would often make mistakes and not find out about that mistake until the shipment failed, and because the mapping rules did not line up. So we're addressing that by taking that mapping rule logic and using that when providing a selection list to the end user on the package ship function, so that they only see those destinations that are eligible for those package deployments. So that really helps to prevent some of those errors from occurring. And then lastly, under the miscellaneous, we've added a new processor JCL parameter called alloc=cond, which provides you with the capability of telling Endevor that this data set is conditional. And what that means is if during a processor execution, Endevor does not find that data set, cannot allocate it, rather than failing the execution, it will see that it was a conditional allocation, and it will put out a message saying that it couldn't find it, but it was going to continue processing. Now, the reason for introducing this parameter goes kind of back to the Agile implementation, where you may have some processor or some subsystems, some applications that need data sets that other ones don't. And for the simplicity of administration of processors with the goal of having as few processors to maintain as possible, the alloc=cond is a real handy way to share processors across different applications that have different data set requirements. And generally, it's the syslib concatenation where this is probably the most useful. And I think I'm done with this one, Vaughn. Move forward. Now, what we moved with version 18, now we try to do that on a release boundary so it doesn't impact you guys. So when we first delivered what we call the base release for version 18, we delivered it without system-defined type sequencing. That was something that had been replaced with global type sequencing, which I think was introduced in release 4 or version 4 of Endevor many years ago. So there is a utility available that's been in the product since we've introduced global type sequencing that will allow you to convert your system-defined definitions to a global definition. The global definition is actually not stored in the Endevor MCF. It's stored in an Endevor PROM-lib number, which is pointed to by C1 default. So this is pretty much easy to do. If you haven't switched over to global type sequencing, you can run that utility and it will help out. We've disabled some interfaces due to the nature. Usually NetMan and InfoMan products are no longer supported. The Roscoe interface, there is still a Roscoe and it's still actively supported, but long ago, before Endevor became part of the CA family, we had developed a Roscoe interface for Endevor, and it had really been languishing and not used. Instead, people use what's available and provided with Roscoe to use an ISPF interface so that you could go directly to Roscoe and invoke Endevor from there. So the Endevor supplied Roscoe interface has just been dropped. Now the reason we do this is it helps us to not only keep the product a little bit more clean in terms of not having so much baggage, but it also allows us to deliver features and releases quicker because we're not continually testing and validating these old interfaces, which are pretty much not used anymore. The last thing that we've removed was our native security feature. That was predated our external security interface, which allows Endevor to talk to top secret, ACF2, and RACF. The native security was a built-in tool that was in Endevor that was kind of crude, but it did provide capabilities for restricting access to elements and other things. But it couldn't keep up with the demands of what we have today, especially with the long element name support and other things within Endevor. So we've dropped the native security feature, and ESI is the official way to go going forward. So we can go forward, Vaughn. And before you kick in, maybe I could just address, I see that we have a couple of questions in the queue. Maybe we could take care of those while they're still fresh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, there's many questions. Does the compare and merge sit on top of mainframe PDM? And the answer is no. It is implemented using the Eclipse capabilities. It's independent of PDM. For the Eclipse plugin, where there are subsystems that contain several hundred elements, is there a lag time between the mainframe screen response time and the Eclipse response time? That is an excellent question, and it's something that we are continually working on. Obviously, just like ISPF, the more wildcarding you do to get a long element list, a little bit the time required increases. What I discovered with earlier releases of the Eclipse plugin was that it's actually quicker than ISPF, in a sense that there was some overhead in ISPF in building the tables to provide those lists. That said, that there is still a delay with long searches or large searches, and we are looking, going forward, we are looking at ways through programming to provide a sort of a dynamic list building capability so that you could start operating on the information on the list as it's still being returned. So that is a work in progress, but I think that we've made good progress on it already.
Yeah, and I'll chime in too, Pete. Just for those of you who aren't aware, we're about to launch a public repository for our Eclipse plugins, and that will allow you to take in some of these updates maybe without having to wait until there's a new update or an incremental for version 18 or 19 or beyond. So you'll be able to look for those updates from a public Eclipse repository as well.
Good point, Fawn. That's something that's going to be very good that you can get that Eclipse plugin that way. However, there will be, in some cases, there will be some back-end requirements to make sure that the plugin has the capabilities it needs on the back end to provide functionality. The next question, have you looked at integrating atomic release automation with deploy-to-test capability? We are looking at how we can employ other tools to solve some of the requirements. We haven't gotten to the point of, at least in my area of the product, we haven't gotten to the point of looking at atomic yet for doing that. I believe you could probably use it, but as an alternative. Brian, did you have anything more to say that? I didn't have a very good answer on that one. Maybe you have more to say.
Well, what I would add is that for atomic, in particular, the atomic release automation for Z component has a Endevor plugin, and the idea is that you can perform Endevor actions however you need to as part of flows. So, that specific use case would be facilitated through use of basically just the element integrations that are available in ARA for Z. And yes, so definitely you should be able to do that. And as Pete mentioned, you can kind of use you can use Atomic however you would see fit, right? So you may have flows to do that use case. You may have flows to add on to Endevor use cases. But one of the key things with that is that we know that customers have a lot of automation already built into Endevor processors, and that's why Endevor integration into Atomic is key, right? You don't want to reinvent that. What you want to do is extend and build upon that. So that capability is there, and I think you'll find out of all the release automation tools on the market, of course, because those, it's a CA, they're both CA products. The integration is going to be very tight. One other thing I'll mention too is that you may hear the term CDZ as we go forward. That is a new name that's coming out for Atomic. It stands for Continuous Delivery for IBM Z. That would be what we were previously calling the Atomic Release Automation for Z.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Fawn. That's good. And I think that also covered the next question. For that matter, have you considered using Atomic Release Automation to replace or enhance most, if not all, of package ship? And I think Vaughn answered that. There's a lot of customers that have a successful package ship implementation, and I think it's going to be up to you guys to pick and choose how you want to implement the options. Are there any plans to, in a future release, to remove the Pamphlet interface for ++ include? The answer is no. There are no plans to remove that. And I'm glad that question's here because I just answered it on another matter yesterday. It came up. Is that for people that are moving off of Pamphlet and going to PDSs, they still have the ++ includes and references in their programs. And the Endevor support for ++ include or the librarian-inc, it will still be supported and has always been supported for whether it's a Pamphlet or librarian data set or if it's a PDS or Endevor Live data set in the back. If you happen to be exploiting the Pamphlet long name capability, it gets a little bit more complicated because you would have to use the Endevor Live as the repository to manage that, or use forward delta to manage those long name elements if you're going to store them in an external data set. But if you're going to, I think for the sake of ++ include of long names, I think the most successful solution will be without Pamphlet would be to use an Endevor Live data set. And then you'd have to modify or use the quick edit option or Endevor to manage those data sets or those members outside of that. And say you can't use the ISPF edit or you couldn't use Pamphlet, you would have to use Endevor to manage those data sets, those long names. Boy, these questions keep coming. I'm concerned about the emphasis of Eclipse at the expense of the growing technical debt in regular Endevor. I agree Eclipse is the future. There is tremendous effort required by legacy Endevor sites to prepare for that platform. As Vaughn had said earlier, that indeed we are looking at Eclipse, and we're looking at other things beyond Eclipse as well. Now, Eclipse is where we're at right now, but there is more technology coming. We understand and recognize that a lot of people continue to use the original UIs with ISPF, and as you'll see with version 18, that a lot of effort did go in to support that. So we haven't forgotten. Does dynamic approver obviate the need for user exit, or is it just another option? The answer to that is, I believe it's a good word for me, obviate. I haven't used that word before. And I think it means eliminate or supersede the need for user exit. It does. It's my understanding that user exits that we're looking to ensure that an approver was not the person that modified an element. In the Endevor approver disqualification feature will definitely handle that. If it's making sure that the approver was not the person that created the package, it will also handle that. And Endevor not only checks the current level of the change level for the approver, but it will go through all of the change levels of that element instance that's in the package to make sure that the approver wasn't in any way involved with that. So I think it's a thorough implementation. I think it certainly should remove the need for the user exit. Whew. I think that's the end of the list.
Yeah, nice job, Pete. For those of you who are on the phone line, if you do have an audio question, you can hit #6 to unmute your line. And we'll give everyone a second. But if we don't hear, then we can go ahead and wrap up. And just a reminder, as always, we are recording this session, so the replay will be available out in the community probably on Tuesday after the holiday here in the U.S. And if you have any questions that come to mind later, please feel free to post them out in the community as well.
And Len, I'd like to say one thing, just take advantage of this opportunity in general, just about incremental releases, because I know that there was a lot of confusion and we have an opportunity to improve this. But just to be clear, that Endevor incremental releases, each time we publish an increment, it is considered GA and it is fully supported. There's a little bit of confusion about GA and GA complete. Every increment is GA, it's supported, and if you happen to go from say, increment 1 to increment 6, when you install increment 6, you'll be installing all of the features that were delivered between 1 and 6, as well as all of the fixed maintenance that had been published as well. The increments are delivered in only the change format. You don't get the whole release each time, depending on the size of the change that was included in the increment. It could be very small, or in some cases it could be quite large, like the ISPF panels was kind of large. And there is a question here about multiple two locations in the E2E, or the logging for the webhook server, and the answer to that is that we do have that enhancement in the list, and we're looking at how we can address that. It's an ease of use capability for defining what element activity should be logged and passed on to the webhook server and what shouldn't be. So we recognize that. Thank you. Now, officially, I'm going to turn it over to Vaughn for finishing.
Thanks, Pete. All right. So, ultimately, we want to continue to hear from you guys. Obviously, you're participating today in our community webcast, and that's great. But there's really a number of different avenues where we take your feedback, and I would encourage you to use both. On CA Communities, we have the ideation capability where you can submit your ideas and people can vote on them. We are currently catching up on these and reviewing them, and we'll be putting updates out on that, reviewing what ones we've implemented, what ones we plan on implementing, pulling them into our backlog, and so on. So we are looking at those actively. In fact, Pete and I are supposed to be working on some of that this afternoon. So please do continue to go there and submit your ideas. They're all great ideas that help improve the product and keep it relevant for you guys. We also have validation. So I would encourage everybody on this call, if they're not a validation member, to come and sign up. It allows you to essentially get live demos and into sprint reviews as we're doing the development, so you can give us feedback right away. We have a members-only community. You can get pre-release feature tests and upgrade support from our SWAT team. Pretty easy to register. Just go to validate.ca.com and you will find our CA Endevor SCM project, and it will allow you to provide that early feedback that really drives Agile and makes it a lot more successful in terms of a methodology. And that's pretty much it. If anybody wants to see where we're going for V19, we have product roadmaps available, and you can get that at ca.com/roadmap, or you can also reach out to your account team, schedule a roadmap session, or directly to myself, vaughn.marshall@ca.com, and we can always set up a call where we can talk about our future plans and get your input. Thank you very much. That's it. Everybody enjoy, for the customers in the U.S., enjoy your Memorial Day weekend.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.